Welcome to WP Coffee Talk with your podcast barista, Michelle Frechette. Special thanks to our sponsors, WS Form, WP Explorer, LearnDash, and Sentry Hosting. Michelle Frechette and WP Coffee Talk are proud supporters of Big Orange Heart, whose mission it is to support and promote positive well-being and mental health within remote working communities. Please consider a donation to Big Orange Heart so they can continue to do the amazing work that they do.
Welcome to the next episode of WP Coffee Talk, where I get to speak to people all over the world who are working with WordPress. I am Michelle Frechette. I am your podcast barista, and I'm here today serving it up to Ben Gabler from Rocket.net. How are you, Ben?
Doing great. Really happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. It's very cool. It's nice. I love to talk to different people about all their different projects, and you got some really cool stuff going on. So
sure do. Yeah, it's been a fun ride so far. So definitely looking forward to diving into it.
That's awesome. So the first question I always say is tell us about yourself and what you do. This is like the little nutshell version because we're going to do a deep dive into Rocket a little bit later. But so tell us a little bit about who you are and where do you live? What are you doing? You know, what's fun in life besides hiding from the virus?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get right into it. My name's Ben Gabler. I live in a town called Jupiter, not the planet, right here in South Florida, just a little outside of West Palm Beach. Made famous by Tiger Woods and Alan Jackson and Kid Rock and a bunch of other familiar faces that now live here. I've been in the web hosting industry since I was about 17 years old, back in 2003. And, I was kind of balancing my pizza delivery career with web hosting and, kind of stuck with it ever since. And, it's been a great ride so far and, really excited to be back working with WordPress again on this level and back with some of my peers in the hosting industry.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So Jupiter's probably a little warmer than we are. I'm in Rochester, New York, so it's a little bit colder up here. It's snow on the ground this morning. I walked outside and thought, should have put my boots on, but I didn't.
Yeah, it's been funny. It's actually been a little chilly here, believe it or not. I think today was a high of 60 and everybody in Florida freaks out about that. So yeah, you would think it was -10.
If it was 60 up here, people would be walking around in shorts and tank tops. I kid you not, but it's just it's all perspective, right? It's all point of view. So now I ask everybody to show me their mug or other beverage vessel. What do you got today?
So today I have a glass of wine. I went for a cab out of Napa Valley.
Oh, very nice. Well, I don't have any spirits with me here in the office today, so I'm going with a cup of tea. But look at this cute little teacup that has a little top on it. Keeps your tea nice and warm. That was a gift.
Oh yeah.
Kind of cute, right? So
yeah, that's awesome.
Just plain old tea today. I was gonna go with coffee, but I want to be able to sleep tonight. So
I was gonna say you almost kind of need a hot toddy, right?
When I get home, there you go. There's honey bourbon waiting for me on the shelf.
Perfect.
So tell us, how did you get started with WordPress?
So it was, back in the early days, I had a hosting company called Host9. And, kind of before that, I was employee number 10 at HostGator. So, kind of saw hosting at scale pretty early on. And when HostGator had moved to Texas, I wanted to stay back in Florida. And I started a company called Host9. And really our claim to fame was a platform we built called Reseller Central. And what that did is it allowed our resellers to actually spread their websites out in different locations around the globe. So we had US East, Central, West, and Singapore and Europe. And this was kind of before even Amazon, was really a thing. We were working with fastservers.net back then and SoftLayer. And, at that point we started thinking about it. We saw WordPress just really getting pretty popular. A lot of customers were starting to host it. And one day we said, what if we just gave customers the option to install it when creating their account? A reseller might just save 10 minutes or a couple minutes by just choosing a drop down and saying, hey, by the way, once you create this account, install WordPress. And, the rest is kind of history from there. It's pretty incredible to see, the journey it's taken over all these years. I was also very fortunate enough to see WordPress at scale when we launched it at GoDaddy back in 2013. I was a part of the team that managed the new hosting products over there. So, worked on the managed WordPress product, the cPanel hosting and all that fun stuff that we relaunched back then. So definitely seen it at scale. And, when I was most recently chief product officer at a company called StackPath. We had a CDN and a web application firewall. It was there that I really saw a lot of WordPress users trying to optimize and secure their websites. You know, one of the brands we bought was Max CDN, very well known in the WordPress community. And every day I'd see customers just doing these partial integrations, just doing static assets. I'm like, there's a request that still goes to the server every time to fetch that HTML that then renders those static assets. And it was just, the concept of marrying a CDN and your hosting product together was kind of a new foreign concept. So, that's kind of how Rocket.net was born. I wanted to take all of that and combine it into a single offering under a single pane of glass for our customers. And, it's been great.
That's awesome. Now I remember when I first started with WordPress, my best friend and I decided we wanted to do a nonprofit organization, and her husband worked in WordPress. So he built us a website, and then he gave us a login and said, just, populate it, right? You go in and do stuff. And we were terrified of pushing buttons and everything. Of course, that was a long time ago. I'm pretty well acquainted with WordPress now. But at the time, it was like, so then I thought I could build websites. Like I could have projects, I could do these things. And so I bought a URL. And I had no idea how to go from owning a domain to having a website. And so he's like, well, you just purchase hosting and then you put it on the hosting. I'm like, but what's the step in between buying a domain and putting it on the host? And so I sat down with him. Actually, she worked nights at the time. I sat down with him. I made their kids dinner that night so he could teach me how to do that stuff.
There you go.
And this is how long ago it was. He's like, they do have this thing called one button install, but you shouldn't do that. It was a while ago. Of course, now one button install is great, but I will say that having learned how to do the download, the upload, learning about salt keys and all those different things, and understanding how the WP config file works and how those things, that was beneficial, of course, to understand those things. But yeah, it's so much easier now than when I started.
No, and you raise a good point. It's really good to understand what you're working with sometimes, because there's there's so many different things that kind of create this content management system. It's there's really a lot more underneath the hood, and it's always good to kind of understand that and know your way around it if you have to.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's interesting too. Before I worked with GiveWP, and I've been there over 3 years now, I was a freelancer for 5 years. And you would say to people, they'd say, every once in a while, a customer would say, well, what are you going to use to build the website? Most of them had no clue. They just thought you did magic and then it just appeared. And I'd say WordPress. And every once in a while, isn't that just for blogging?
That's right.
Or doesn't that get hacked a lot? Like those are the two questions, if I get any questions about using WordPress. It's so different now. It is so different now. So anyway, I mean, it's the biggest CMS we have. And so, yes, it's definitely a target, but there are ways to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, that's one of the beauties of what we built, not to be a shameless plug, but, honestly, being able to provide that level of security to where that takes that question and fear out of the equation, and it's, our customers don't need the plugins. They don't need to worry about security or other things, because it's just baked in to the platform in multiple layers, not just one. And at that point, it's, it's literally, we like to say, our customers get to do what they do best, and that's focus on content. And that's really, what we love to see every day, is just customers being able to, generate business and put food on their tables and do it while sleeping at night, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Unless, of course, they like the graveyard shift, which is totally fine.
Well, as long as it's not the 24-hour shift, that's the important part, that they do get to sleep, and they're not worried about it when they do. They can go on vacation, they can do all those things because they know that somebody's got their back, right? That's the important thing.
Exactly.
Absolutely. What's something that you wish, I'm skipping a question. I do this all the time. Go back because I like to do them in order, so they're all the same. Next question. What is something that you think people skip too often when they're building websites? So as designers, as builders, as developers, what's something we don't pay enough attention to that makes a website better for the end user?
I would hands down say security. I think security is looked at sort of like car insurance. You hate to pay that bill until you actually need the car insurance, right? And I think the same goes for security. I think it's not that, I think the biggest misconception with WordPress, honestly, is that it's an insecure product, and it's not at all. It's a very popular product that's open sourced. And what that means is there's people constantly looking at this code and finding vulnerabilities in it. I mean, at the end of the day, how many updates does your iPhone get, right? Software is never done. Software is never perfect. There's always new in order to have evolution of, and have software constantly ship new features, there's going to be new bugs introduced, and that's just the way it goes. So, I think it could be any product out there in the world, and WordPress just happens to be the most popular, so it gets the most recognition for those things. And I would definitely have to say, don't skip security, right? It doesn't matter if you're getting one hit or 1,000 hits. There are crawlers out there looking at the registration lists of domains. There's public lists out there to see which domains have been registered, and all of a sudden they'll get added to a list and bots will just start hitting it. We have customers say, this is a brand new site, how am I getting traffic? People see your website, your domain get registered, and these hackers will put it on a list and try to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's not like somebody's sitting there writing them all down. They've got it all.
Oh, it is so fine-tuned and automated. You would be surprised. I mean, there's times where we stand up, new servers with different IP addresses, and even then we'll see hits come in for URLs that never would exist in a million years, but they might have 5 years ago, right? But in our platform, they don't. They're not relevant, but they're just these bots that, they'll just scan IP ranges. It just doesn't matter what the domain even is sometimes.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. They do like to get out there and look for them, but the best way to do it is to have the security in place, like you said. It's like when you talk about how much does it cost to host, and you start talking about discount hosting versus managed hosting versus shared hosting. I mean, there's so much that can go into what a hosting costs, right? And somebody says, oh, $350 a year or $400 a year, $1,000 a year, whatever it is, that's an awful lot. Well, it's an awful lot if you don't care what happens to your website.
Or it's an awful lot if and coming from a guy that started out in budget hosting, HostGator, Host9, all these different companies, I think it's all about, I think the biggest mistake that was ever made in the hosting industry is the unlimited $3 a month hosting. Like, every hosting company shot themselves in the foot, right? And the reason I say that is the only reason hosting's that cheap is because hosting decided to be that cheap, right? There's no MSRP on hosting. So, and a lot of these companies have these margins that just, only exist because of, how large they are, and they own 10 different brands, and, customers bounce back and forth. But, when you think about actually running a healthy business and what that margin has to be and what the actual cost is, $30 a month for hosting that comes with CDN, WAF, and all, malware scanning and everything else that, people don't realize that you actually end up spending more at a shared, budget host when you have to add in security or, another, service like that. So it's
absolutely,
I think it's all a lot of, misconception based on, well, I can get it for $3.95. Then you get to the order form and it's actually, I remember I was on a website, and I won't mention their name. I may have worked there in the past, and it was like $1 to get started for your first year. And then it's like, oh, you want SSL? That's an extra $10 a month, and you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah. And, SSL, yes, SSL is not free to whoever, somebody's paying for it, but it makes sense that it's built into the cost of your web hosting, because it's just as important to the web host to have that security as it is to the end user to have that security. So, like, build it in there, pay for it, don't think about it again, because it's there and it's in place.
Absolutely. We had somebody, a very technical person, just kind of taking our platform for a ride the other day, and it's, wow, it's not just about the SSL server, but we don't even allow insecure traffic, right? Like, we just force SSL because that's, it's 2021. Why wouldn't you? So it's like not even an option, and there's so many times that we'll move websites from, some of these budget providers, and I'm like, you realize you didn't have SSL, right? Like, oh yeah, but this site, I don't really pay attention to it. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but now you have SSL, don't worry about it. It's just there.
Yeah, exactly. Because people visiting your site are paying attention to that a lot of the time.
That's right.
And they want to know that their little green lock means something to them. Absolutely.
And so is Google now, right? So
yeah, exactly. Do you want to rank?
Yeah. Do you want us to list you?
Exactly. All right. What's something that you wish you had known earlier in your WordPress journey that you've learned since that might have made things a little bit easier? This is kind of the note to younger self thing, right?
Yeah, I think I would have really acknowledged kind of, I think back at Host9 when we had Reseller Central, we really created this thing that just seemed like a very small feature, right? Like that you could just auto install WordPress. Now you look fast forward today and you see all these companies, it's like, you don't install WordPress, it's crazy. We kind of like pioneered that back in the day. And, I wish we would have taken a little bit bigger of a look at that and been able to kind of provide some of that to more of, the market. Like one thing I love about what I do today is I'll go on Facebook groups and just help people with, advice on CDNs. It's not ever name dropping our brand. Like, it's not about that for me. Like I really like taking 17 years of web hosting knowledge and giving back, to other people and helping, because there's not a lot of us out there that kind of have that experience. So, it's nice to be able to kind of contribute that. But, I wish we could have seen more of what was coming back then and really help contribute more to the community early on.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love the different answers that people give for all these different questions, because it's all perspective, right? It's from where you sit in the space that makes a lot of difference. Now, you've attended WordCamps before? Yes, you said you went to Phoenix.
Yes.
Whatever. Okay.
Yes,
So when you think back over your WordCamp experiences or any other meetups or WordPress type events, what's an experience or a moment that was kind of pivotal to you? Maybe the lights came on and aha moment. What was it? Was it a person or an experience that you had? And tell us a little bit about that.
So, I think the big moment for me, it actually even dates back before WordCamp. Is in 2006, I attended my first, what was, it's no longer around, but Hosting Con. And, seeing face to name, right? That's huge. And, I spent a lot of time in IRC, the ugly version of Slack. And, I spent a lot of time in IRC talking to, CEO of cPanel and a lot of the employees there, like starting to use it on, early on. And then, when you think about that experience just at a conference in general or a meetup, and you really get to make that human connection, even just like this podcast, right? Like it's different to see face to face versus on a phone call and having a, interview over the phone or a podcast or whatever, it just makes a world of a difference. So for me, when I realized WordPress was really, gaining this crazy momentum, like not only did we have a whole team focused on it at GoDaddy, but seeing it, right? The Phoenix WordCamp was packed. And, I remember people were like, GoDaddy, what are you doing here? And we're like, well, we actually have this really cool managed WordPress product. And oh, by the way, we bought Media Temple. Their WordPress products ours too. And, it was really just that those moments of being involved and just the peers, right? Like Easy WP, Namecheap company, right? I am great friends with Matt Russell that runs that. And it's one of the things I value the most about this industry is there's no competitors. Like we are competitors, but we help each other. We talk to each other, like we joke around and we also see trends. Like we'll text back and help each other. And, that was another big moment. Is like, hey, like I am not enemies with Namecheap or whoever. Like it's not that type of industry. We all really do genuinely care about each other and just want everybody to have success,
Right.
like we didn't build Rocket.net because there was crappy WordPress companies out there. There's some incredible companies out there. We just knew that we could be one of them as well and also offer a very unique offering, service in the market. But yeah, I would definitely say WordCamp and WordPress specifically was just seeing the massive attendance that a WordCamp drew. I was like, man, and everybody is so friendly, so nice. The variety of people you get to meet is incredible. The people that traveled across the world to be there, I was like, man, this is awesome.
That's fantastic. I agree with you 100%. The community that built up around software, right, is just like, it's phenomenal. Other companies have tried it, like Google. There's, Google, we have like Rochester Googlers here, kind of thing. And it fizzled fairly quickly. It's like, yeah, it's a group of tools that you could use, blah, blah, blah. But nothing like the way that I've seen WordPress.
Yeah, I've been to Google Next and it's too big, right? Like, and it's just so broad. And, I remember when I was at StackPath, we met with some of the execs at Google Cloud and it was just like, we have 10 minutes, you're at 9 minutes, 59 seconds. Let's talk, and you're like, man, like not to say that Google doesn't have a great team of people and they do attend to their customers, but it was just so massive. You're like, I look at my CEO at the time, Lance Crosby. I'm like, what do we do? I'm like, where do we go? There's like 16 things going on right now,
And I think it's different too, because Google's huge, of course, but I'm talking like there's local, like we have local
Yeah.
meetups and local word camps and anything from 50 people to 500 people just in a city, that are getting together on a regular basis. It kind of boggles the mind a little bit that we all come together around that. In the local meetup here, we have people who have their own businesses using WordPress, and they come to every single WordPress meetup that we have. It's like
Yep.
become a social club, but they're also learning something. They ask questions. I've watched their sites grow and develop over the years, even though they're not web designers,
Right.
but they're invested in their business enough to want it to be the best. And that starts local, it goes global, and to me, it's pretty phenomenal.
I could totally agree with that and level with that, because one of the what I call big wins that we had lately is more of like a moral win for the company. Is I'm born and raised Jupiter, Florida, and one of the big things here is loggerhead turtles, right? So we're a part of the then Palm Beach Tech Association, now South Florida Tech Association, which is just thriving with a lot of people moving to Miami and whatnot. But they said, hey, you guys have WordPress, go check out rocket.net. They're a member, they have a great product, and marinelife.org. They're like, how much? I'm like, what? Like, it's free. Like, we want you to take that hosting cost that you're paying this other hosting company and put it towards turtles, right? And for us, it's just seeing when I first started in the hosting industry, I'd be at somebody's house and their parents would say, what do you do for a living? I'm like, build websites. I never did that, because like, if I try to explain hosting, it's not happening.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
But nowadays people are really starting, and I like to say having a website went from being cool to a necessity. And to see something as local as like, the Loggerhead Marine Center using WordPress, I'm like, man, like, we would love to help you guys. And it's just awesome. Like you see that whole scale of, we have web professionals that have an entire business building websites, and you have marinelife.org that's just like, we need to have a website to take donations for turtles.
Yeah. I tell people now I work in software because I'm not building sites anymore. And if I try to explain what a plugin is and how we help nonprofits, it's like, oh, I'm the customer success for a software company. And then somebody goes,
absolutely.
Once somebody actually said, well, have you ever heard of WordPress? I'm like, well, as a matter of fact. Yes, I have.
Let me tell you what I really do.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're one of those people. You're my people. I can tell you that. That's too funny. Let's dive a little bit more into what you guys do at Rocket. So you are managed WordPress hosting. I'm gonna just pelt you with questions you didn't know were coming because I'm curious now. There's been a move away from in a lot of hosting companies away from the traditional cPanel. Are you using cPanel? Do you have your own interface? What are you doing for that?
So, it's funny, like if you ask our customers, they would say we don't use cPanel. So at the end of the day, I've been using cPanel since version 4, I think it was, and it is really an incredible piece of software. When you think about a orchestration layer that is focused on creating, web server, creating accounts, database management, for us, when we built Rocket, a lot of, the magic for us was really at the edge, right? Which is sort of, even the edge is like a new phenomenon. What is the edge? And really it's, getting the content as close as possible to what, in the industry said the eyeballs, which is people. And, for us, we needed a reliable way to orchestrate WordPress. And because 98% of the traffic on our platform is delivered from Cloudflare Enterprise, we were able to take something like, cPanel and actually use the pieces that we needed. So our customers, cPanel is blocked off to the world. At the end of the day, what we use cPanel for is provision accounts. That's it, right?
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
So because of the way that we've built our, our business, it's, a lot of people are moving away from cPanel because of financial reasons, right? These budget hosting providers can't afford these price increases by cPanel. And it sort of goes back to what I said earlier, when hosting kind of shot itself in the foot by going so cheap. And, what we actually hope it does is I'd like to see cPanel in a way kind of bring the market where it should be, at, to make it like, hey, cPanel is a great solution. I've known Nick Costin for years, years and years, great guy. Him and his brother Dave. I worked with his brother Dave at several startups. Brilliant, both brilliant. They built an amazing thing that, I'm proud to say I've been using for 17 years. And, I think cPanel just gets looked at like, ugh, that's shared hosting. It's so commoditized and cheap. Nobody wants to be on that. In reality, it's like, that's not it at all. Like, would you say Nginx is cheap hosting? No. Nginx is used by some of the largest companies in the world, right? It's also used on shared hosting.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason a lot of these people are moving away from cPanel, they just can't afford it in their business model anymore. It's getting too expensive for the prices that they're charging. So,
Yeah.
I think they have a heck of a team and they've done a great job building features out, and they've got some good stuff and it's very reliable software.
I think you know somebody who's used cPanel a while when they can look at it and tell you, oh, that's the paper lantern theme.
Yeah, exactly. And true
Look at
story,
you like,
Paper
what?
Lantern, our co-founder Aaron Phillips actually was at cPanel for 8 years, and he saw what we did at GoDaddy in 2013, and Paper Lantern was actually heavily designed based off of the custom GoDaddy theme we built.
And it's what most
So
people think of when they think of cPanel, I think.
absolutely, it used to be X3, which was a really popular one for years and years and years, and then Paper Lantern, when they shipped that, I remember a lot of people were like, I want to stay on X3, and then eventually, as Paper Lantern got super flexible, they're like, no, we really like this.
Everything changes, everything stays the same.
That's right.
Absolutely. So what do you think of all of these companies now coming out with static hosting for WordPress?
I think it's interesting, right? So the even at StackPath, we used WordPress, and we would actually ship WordPress to a storage bucket, or use WP to static. Very good friends with the founder there, and spent a lot of time talking through WP static back then. But I said, I'm like, I don't want to worry about it. And I said, let's just use WP to static, put it in a storage bucket, and put our CDN in front of it. And we did that, and it was great. But then updates, deployments, this, that, the other, and that's why I kind of like what we're doing now is sort of static WordPress, right? Because at the end of the day, WordPress is a content management system. And the only people that should be using PHP with WordPress are the content managers, and then obviously things like WooCommerce, which even WooCommerce, I think there's some really cool opportunities that serverless scripting brings to WooCommerce to help with some of the things there. But I think when we treat WordPress like a content management system, like take our platform for example, I go in and update a page. Our MU plugin will then purge the cache on Cloudflare through our API for that URL and any related URLs. But what happens is WordPress is outputting HTML. That's what it does, right? So what we do with full page caching is take that HTML, and through Argo smart routing with tiered caching, we put that at 200 pops of Cloudflare. So then when people are pulling, that's why 98% of the traffic is served from Cloudflare. We have customers doing 40,000 hits a minute on our platform.
Wow.
And our servers are just like, where's the traffic? We don't see it because it's all getting spread through Cloudflare,
Right.
and it's being served as close as possible to the end, to the visitor. And, I think that's really where, like one of the things we'll say is like scale content, not PHP. There's a lot of providers out there like PHP workers. And even on our platform, we don't care if you use a caching plugin or not, because at that point, we're still caching take W3 Total Cache, it's creating a page cache on the disk. Still helps on a cache miss, don't get me wrong. But the same thing it's doing, our platform is doing at the edge, right? So that's where, when we think about that, it's, just really being able to scale the content, and that's effectively static hosting, static, headless, whatever you want to call it, is kind of doing that, but you still have WordPress managed on maybe some random domain. And then it's almost like a staging environment, and it publishes it to a storage bucket, and boom, no more security to worry about. That's probably the biggest benefit. Like you truly don't need a web application firewall or anything like that because you're statically hosting it. But at the end of the day, if you're using the right tool set, that kind of doesn't matter, because even then the only requests kind of making it there are dynamic anyways, and they're going to get blocked. So, I think it's interesting. I think, there's some companies out there really trying to make it seamless. And I think if they can figure that out, I think it'll make it a great experience for certain companies. But it's also, there's a lot of tinkering that goes into making your site compatible if you have a contact form that's not using HubSpot or something like that, right? Like you now have to figure out how to send all of your, submissions to Netlify or, whatever, platform out there, Cloudflare workers. And then at that point, you're now adding friction into the user experience. And that's a huge problem.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed is you either have to have SaaS products to serve some of those kinds of things, or using iframes that are bringing things in from outside because of the way that it interacts.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, like the what's the name of the comment plugin? starts with a D. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head for some reason. End of the day. Yes, discuss. Yep. Yeah. And it's like, you could do that, right? But at the end of the day, now you're adding in a layer of third-party dependency that could potentially slow your site down, right? So yeah, I think there's some great companies, but I still think there's a lot of friction involved in it.
Still in its infancy, really. But it's really kind of fun to kind of watch and see what's happening with it. I think that when people think about hosting, they think about three things. They think about speed, they think about security, and they think about price. And they've got to find the right combination of those things to where they're willing to pay for what they're getting. And then if you let me know if you don't think that's right, but I think that's kind of where it comes down to for most end users. That's kind of what they're looking at those three things and trying to figure out how that triangle works.
And I agree. I think outside of the pricing one, which I agree with you hands down, but I remember telling the team at Raga when we were launching, I said, there's three things that make this company up: simple, fast, secure. That's it. Simple, fast, secure, right? We can go into Argo, this, that, blah, 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 blah. Like, we can get super technical and have all this technical talks, no problem. I'm a product engineering guy at heart, right? So that's no problem. But at the end of the day, there's three key traits, and it's simple, fast, and secure. And I think, like a lot of our agency customers look for that simplicity. They just want to create a site, go. And the fast and secure really feed into that simple aspect for us, because we make it simple to be fast and secure. But pricing definitely, I think for what we call more of a retail channel, I think pricing is super important. And granted, agencies, pricing is important, but I think there's more of a realization of what that pricing should be when it comes to the buying process.
I think a lot of it comes down to who is actually negotiating that. So if I was freelancing or when I was freelancing, I was building for a local restaurant or for the dog shelter down the road. I mean, I was building, small local mom and pop kind of sites. Then that's when pricing became an issue, because I charged a static amount for building the site, and then all the rest had to get built into that, and whether or not that company or that like I said, mom and pop in some respects, right, could build it into their budget. So that's where the pricing part comes into it.
We have a customer, I actually went to high school with him, and he runs a landscaping company, and he's obviously super friendly for me. Like, I've known him forever, and I said, hey, like, I need to do some performance testing. Your site probably has 500 plugins. It's perfect. And it did. And he says, sure, no problem. And I said, by the way, where are you hosted at right now? And he was hosted with an agency. And I said, what are you paying a month? He goes, $800. I'm like, well, what? He's like, we're doing SEO too. And I'm like, man, this is broken. This is broken. Like the map component's not loading. Contact forms are, like, it was like a bad WordPress.
So
update.
What are you paying for again?
Yeah. I'm like, so what? He's like, well, I don't know. Like, every time I call him and complain, like, I start to get more calls. And I'm like, it's because they might actually lift a finger when you call and complain. But it's interesting to see, like, the spectrum of what some mom and pops are even willing to pay depending on the business. I've seen dating all the way back to the early 2000s. I've seen $100 monthly management fees. I've seen $150. I've seen $800. I've seen even thousands of dollars, right? And you're absolutely right. It just depends, right? And I think it also depends on, also how the agency or freelancer will look at the project in general and say, you know what, maybe the hosting's a line item here, but security's here. And, they don't need to know about speed and CDN, but security for sure. I mean, you sell anybody security if you, sell it properly, right?
Yep. So it's all in that relationship and how that relationship is built and how you can build the pricing structure into it together. So it's different, and it's been a while since I've done it. I admit it's been a while since I've been that person negotiating those kinds of things, but that's
it's interesting.
My memory anyway.
It's interesting too with our scale of pricing. The more sites an agency has, the cheaper their price gets, right? Like, we have some customers that will get $10, $12 a site, maybe even cheaper depending on their scale. And at the end of the day, they're getting all of these features that would cost, we're saving people. We have this case study on our website called the plugin diet. And there are some cases like that we would save these agencies a lot of money. They don't need this because we do all the stuff for them. And, it's interesting once people can finally realize, like, hey, actually, the more sites we have, because we're getting more of this custom price based on usage, and it's almost shared hosting pricing, right? But for us, it's totally different because we have one customer that might have 100 sites, right? And we're able to get to that price point because, it's not 100 customers where you have to scale support differently. And that's, I think that's a piece that goes into it too, that a lot of folks don't, might not understand or see.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I'd like to move into our rapid fire questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I always say I'll ask them rapidly, but you can take the time you need to answer them. What are 2 or 3 must-have plugins that you would recommend to somebody building their own website?
Boy, I think there's a scale of free and premium. I really love the WP Rocket plugin. I worked with them very closely at StackPath. Great team over there. If they're listening, we still love to talk more about partnership. But I love that plugin. I think what's happening is they're not a caching plugin, right? Like they have page caching, but really they're a content optimization plugin. And I always try to recommend content optimization. Our platform will deliver 70 millisecond time to first byte around the globe, but there's still a user experience component that goes into how the page renders and how many requests are made. On the free side, Auto Optimize, love that plugin. I think it's great. I think that's a phenomenal plugin for the free side of things. I think it can minification, even some preloading. It's great. And the other one that I always recommend, no matter what platform you're on, is WPS Hide login, right? Like that is amazing. That's one of the things that we'll be building into the platform in the future. But the ability to just say, I'm going to hide, and not every site can do this. If it's a blog that has a lot of customers logging in, they can't do it. But for a lot of the static websites, it's a no-brainer, right? I absolutely love that plugin. I tell customers about it all the time.
I built a website once for a church. And so I wanted to give them a custom login just because I was learning how to do it and all that. And I was using that plugin actually. And so I wish I could remember exactly what the Bible verse is, but there's a Bible verse that says, knock and the door shall be opened.
That's awesome.
So the website was churchname.org/ like Matthew 7:3 or something like that.
They'll never forget that. That's amazing.
They won't forget it. Nobody else is going to think of it, right? So
yeah.
I thought I was pretty darn clever, not going to lie.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it.
It was a good one. Okay, next question. Did you have a mentor at any part of your WordPress journey, whether it was official, somebody who took you under their wing, or somebody that you have looked up to and emulated? And who was it?
So not necessarily WordPress. Okay. I would say, one of the coolest moments for me was, working with Lance Crosby at StackPath. I just learned so much, but over the years of even being a customer at SoftLayer, Lance was sort of that unofficial, like mentor, like my go-to guy. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We have a teaser deck for rocket.net and, working on a cap raise and I send it to Lance, like, what do you think? He's like, that kicks ass. And I'm like, oh my God, nailed it. Because he's not afraid to be totally blunt and honest. But I think on the flip side of it, I've always really understood hosting and from a technical aspect, from a sales aspect, and support. But it's the business side of things. And one of the last things we did at StackPath together was we went out on the road and raised 165 million on a roadshow. And the things I learned along the way from Lance have just been incredible. So, funny enough, I'm sure SoftLayer contributed to a huge amount of WordPress's growth behind the scenes under the hood. I mean, HostGator, Sci-Fi, all these huge hosting companies that were shipping WordPress out there, SoftLayer for sure. So yeah, not necessarily WordPress direct, but definitely have to give some props to him for all the knowledge he's been able to share.
That's awesome. It's so good to have people like that in your life that you can look up to, learn from, and have somebody to bounce those ideas off of. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, next question is, who is somebody you admire? And you got to stick to WordPress on this one. Who is somebody in the WordPress community that you admire and why?
Oof. There's a lot,
you can have two if you need to. You can have two.
So, I think, Frederick Towns, probably also a very familiar name, W3 Total Cash founder and creator. I've known Frederick for years and years and years. And, seeing what he did with W3 Total Cash was phenomenal. The amount of positive impact he was able to make with his team at W3 Total Cash was just incredible. And that's one thing that I truly admire about him was, it's very similar to like my part of my mission with WordPress. Like obviously we all need to generate income and make a living and take care of our families, but a big part of like my aha moments are when I see a customer come to us and be like, oh my gosh, Ben, like you just changed the game for us. Like this is incredible. Like, we had a customer that was actually at Pressable for 10 years, moved to our platform, and we were able to help him use flying scripts, awesome plugin, right? To help some of his customers. And he was like, oh my gosh, I never even knew about this, right? And we didn't build the plugin, but we were able to help him like, hey, we could actually really improve your user experience like this, that, and the other. And seeing Frederick do that at such scale with millions and millions and millions of installs, I truly admire that.
That's really cool. It's nice that there are so many people in WordPress that we can look to, but that's nice that we can name people specifically. I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, Matt would just be too obvious, right? I can't give Matt all the props, right?
He gets named a lot. I'm not gonna lie,
yeah.
But he's not the only one, that's for sure.
But that it goes without saying, even Matt and his team, that the entire team, that I just love the, I will say one of the things I truly admire about Matt is the ability to still empower such a large community and not put the $ glasses on, right? Like, it's not just about that. Like, it's still very much, I watch State of the Word, like it's still very much about the community. I love the Gutenberg full site editing that's coming. Like, I think that's the Wix Weebly, Square killer that comes in and really, out of the gate makes it interesting. So, that's, again, it goes without saying, but, definitely admire a lot of that, ability to still, I mean, like, look, we're a WordPress hosting company. They own them, but they still empower the WordPress hosting companies.
That we could all make a living because of WordPress is phenomenal.
Exactly.
Absolutely. What's something that you still want to learn in WordPress, but that you haven't tackled yet?
Gutenberg.
Developing or using it?
I guess both. No, I think for me, it's, I love helping people, like our customers. Is, I love being able to solve their problems. Like one thing I hate is like, go talk to the plugin developer. So I think one thing that I'd really like to learn is just more about and I saw the education, I think it's like learn.wordpress.org. I think that's what it's called. During the State of the Word, I'm like, man, this is awesome. I'm like, this is free training for customers, but also for us. I'm like, I'd love to learn more about it just to be more well-versed. And then granted, Gutenberg's new. It's not like I really had a lot of time that I slacked off and didn't learn it. But no, I think that's definitely, one of the things. And even, I scare people at jobs sometimes because I'll comment on code reviews and they're like, why is this guy commenting on a code review? He's like product guy or whatever. And I remember paying really close attention to when we built, had this MU plugin built and seeing how it registered with actions and, just the things that you're able to do. I'm like, man, I really want to learn more about the inner workings of WordPress.
Yeah, there's so much. And I don't, like you said before, it's never done, right? Software continues to develop and grow. So as soon as you think you know it all, there's so much more you never know.
Exactly.
Absolutely. What's one of the biggest mistakes that you've ever made in WordPress, and what did you learn from it? I call this question the great equalizer.
So, it's funny. I would say when I was at StackPath, I'll never forget this. I had a WooCommerce store, like my first week or two that I set up with full page caching, our WAF, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to put our WAF to the test. If the site doesn't get hacked, our WAF's awesome, right? Like, funny little joke internally. And site didn't get hacked. And then all of a sudden I'm like doing a demo one day. I'm like, hey, like and I go to my site, hacked. And I'm like, oh no, this is a problem. And then I looked, one of our product managers turned the WAF off on my site during one of his demos. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'd have to say, shamelessly about a WAF, not necessarily WordPress itself, but I literally didn't have any security measures on it at all. And it got hacked and I had to deal with that in a demo. And that was a fun time.
I do demos for Give WP all day, every day, and that would terrify me if all of a sudden the site wasn't there. So I completely understand.
Is this a good spot to pause real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, just need like 2 seconds here. Sorry about that.
No worries. What's your proudest WordPress moment?
Seeing, I think the proudest WordPress moment, there's been a couple of them. I think it was really awesome to be able to kind of take this idea and bring it to life in a non selfish way. Like I really liked being able to put WordPress in an internet exchange as the origin. I really love seeing Cloudflare Enterprise and everything it's become, and kind of marry those two together and see what kind of performance and difference we were actually able to make with that recipe. And funny enough, it's not the selfish, oh, it's the rocket success. It's really just about seeing what we were able to do, right? Like 70 millisecond timer first byte, for first paint improvements with no changes. I'm like, okay, like this is awesome. And it was a very proud moment to be able to see like, hey, this is real. Like we were able to kind of effortlessly take this landscaping website with a bajillion plugins and make it this fast, because the content it's like proving the thesis true, right? Like delivering content as close as possible to the website visitor. That was a really proud moment for me.
That's awesome. It's the kind of stuff that you can't put on a refrigerator with a magnet like you could when you were a little kid, but it still makes you real excited. Like, Mom, look.
I couldn't exactly explain it to my wife, but it was still awesome.
Trust me, honey, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fast. Oh, cool.
I know. The first time I built a website, my ex-husband, I was like, look, I built a website. He's like, oh yeah, that's nice. No, you don't understand
You don't understand.
You know how many hours went into that? I even built the logo. Oh yeah, it's really nice. Okay, we'll talk later.
Yep.
And you call your best friend because she's also in WordPress and she gets it, right?
That's right.
If you weren't working in web or technology, what's another career that you might like to attempt?
CSI.
Ooh.
I know, right? Like I make a joke a lot of the times, and it's not really a joke. The least stressful job I ever had was delivering pizza. But excuse me, I love forensic science. Like I love watching the First 48 and all those like murder TV shows. Like I just I have a knack for it. So I'm always like, man, if I never fell into hosting, I think that's where I would have went. I don't know that I had the stomach for it. But it's forensic files. Like I love that show. It's just really intriguing.
There's a new app called Crime Door. Look it up.
I haven't.
I do too. It's pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Okay, next question. What's something on your bucket list?
Bucket list. That's a tough one. I would have answered that a while ago, buying a fishing boat and being able to fish all the time. But I was fortunate enough to do that after Host 9.
Nice.
If you would ask me when I was in Dallas, my wish list would have been moving back home, which I was fortunate enough to do that last year. I think maybe, I'd have to say going to Bora Bora. It always looks so cool.
It really does.
I just don't know if I can handle the travel time it takes to get there, especially being in South Florida. Like our water is very similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's on, that's up there for sure.
Very nice. Someday we'll all be able to travel again. I hear it's going to
happen. You know what? My bucket list is to be able to go to a conference again in person.
I'm with you on that one. Absolutely. Although the digital conferences are allowing me to do things like speak at WordCamp India coming up, and I wouldn't be able to afford to do that. So
there you go.
So it has its plus, it's got its pros and cons, let's say. Show us or tell us about a hidden talent that you have that the WordPress community might not know about.
Hidden talent.
Maybe you sing sea shanties. Those are really popular right now.
I was in a band, rock band for 4 years during one of my early hosting company days. Even at HostGator, Brent Oxley actually came and watched me play guitar in my band at a show in Pompano once. And I still have a couple guitars scattered throughout. So I would probably playing guitar in the middle of taking different chats.
That's very cool. I've noticed in the background of a lot of people in WordPress, you see guitars on walls. So it must be as a common, like we all want to be a rock star somewhere in there.
Yeah, we all are.
That's pretty cool. I love it. How can we find you online and social media? What's your website? What's your Twitter handle? Give us some details.
So we're fortunate enough to work with Michael from VPN.com to change our brand from onrocket.com to rocket.net. So, the name is, pretty easy to find us,
It
rocket.net.
is.
I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, all the usual suspects on there. I love to connect on LinkedIn. For me, I don't necessarily pay attention to messages too often, because if they're like this long, it's like a sales pitch.
Right.
But I love to see people's backgrounds and where they've been and kind of their experience and just kind of understand more about who I'm talking to and connecting with. So, I'm a big fan of networking on LinkedIn. One of the coolest things that I saw at a meetup, back to our meetup talk is, we were at a meetup during Gamescom, I think it was in San Francisco, and I did a talk at an event sponsored by IBM about sort of edge computing. And when we first got there, the organizer said, "Okay, everybody, open up LinkedIn and turn on the nearby feature for the next 15 minutes and just add everybody." And I was like, "Man, that's awesome!" I'm like, that's such a good idea. And I like
I
every
didn't
meetup
even
I
know
went
that
to
was a
after
thing.
that, I didn't either. And it's like, man, like this is really cool. And like every meetup after that, I'm like, hey, everybody should like, hey, what's your LinkedIn? Just go on here and say, find me or nearby or something like that. And I'm like, man, that was a really cool thing.
Someday when we have in-person conferences, we can do that again.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we let you go for the night?
I just want to thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet you as well. And,
Yeah, nice to meet you.
I hope as soon as we can do some in-person events, I love to hang out and get to know more about, WP Give and all the things that we might be able to extend to, our customers and then or give WP, just kind of understand how we could all work together. And like, I really love taking some of these different plugins and kind of being able to position, like Loggerhead's a great example, right? Like, marinelife.org, like, hey, you guys should check this plugin out. I'm not sure what they're using today. And, just face the name's great and just continuing to network and grow, together.
Fantastic. Well, it was so great to meet you. Thanks for being on this episode. Anybody who's listening or watching, all the show details will be on WPCoffeeTalk.com. Just go ahead, get on there, look for Ben's episode, and you can find all the links. Click through to his company, to his Twitter, to his LinkedIn, all that good stuff. And we'll see you all on the next episode. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay happy.